Senior lecturer at Keele University, Sharon George, joins us now live from Keele in the UK. Sharon, those pictures that we just saw, they're alarming to say the least. And every time we see news on melting Arctic ice, it is beyond depressing. Is that the major cause of this, and is it accelerating?
It is accelerating. The more that we are producing greenhouse gases, the more we're driving up temperatures, the more the ice is melting. But this is exacerbated. It's not just one effect on it by itself. The rising sea levels are then exacerbated by a combined effect through rising temperature. So a rise in sea temperature drives storms. So imagine the impact that you've got already, like the amount of people who live in coastal areas having their livelihoods threatened by more storms driven by this climate change. This is inundating land with water. This is changing land. So farmers are struggling because the land is becoming saline, and this is driving people into cities. And 1 in 10 people globally live in low-lying cities that are. This situation is just exacerbating, and it's driving human migration. And it is a problem that we need to deal with urgently, globally.
So when we see some of the efforts, like we just saw in the piece that ran, people building seawalls, it kind of feels like the efforts of ants in the face of the ocean. But they might be effective. Are those efforts sustainable, though?
Well, the ocean, keeping the ocean, but unless we're going to do these mitigations on a permanent level, we're talking about holding the sea back and engineering areas to keep this water back. And we have to ask ourselves, is this economically viable? And in places where we're seeing just the amount of water and these surges. There's one thing being able to plan for a gradual rise in water, but then when you couple that with the surges that we see and the sudden inundation of water, and you need to think as well that a lot of the places that are the most vulnerable are often the places that are the least able to put these mitigations in place. So there's a lot of vulnerable people who are affected by this issue, and this is going to massively drive huge human migration as one of the biggest impacts of what we're seeing in these images.
Sometimes these problems that are looming only become real when we start to feel the effects of them. Now we're actually seeing this. For example, in the United States, coastal cities like Miami realized several years ago, we now flood on a sunny day. It doesn't even take rain anymore. So with human beings feeling some of these effects, unfortunately, does that then really start the process of more people catching on that climate change is indeed happening and we need to do more on a number of levels?
I think this is part of the problem that up until now, climate change and our global emissions are somewhat of they've been up until now quite an invisible problem for a lot of us. It's hard to imagine that this invisible gas can create these problems that are often far removed from where we live and work. So, and another problem that's exacerbating this is that not all countries are affected in the same way. So those countries that are impacted the most and have their GDP impacted more by these impacts are the ones that perhaps have the least power to do anything about it. So countries like the US, whose GDP is perhaps not quite so affected by these issues, have a big influence in affecting global emissions and being able to curb this through control of global carbon emissions.
Sharon, thank you for watching this for us.